Hey, this is Brent, and today we're going to continue building on the Grateful Moments app that we started in the last video. If you didn't go through that project, you can download the project files here. This again is in our Develop in Swift tutorials, and we're working with views and data storage and using a custom layout view. I've already got the project from what we did last time, so we'll go ahead and open that and open that project. So where we've left off, we created a moments entry view where we can create a new moment, and then we've created a data container which has the logic and handles coordinating sample data as well as the moment object, which is what gets saved. And in the moment object, there's some static sample data that gets populated. So the first thing we want to do is in the Moments folder, right-click and choose New File from Template. And we want a Swift UI file. And we're going to call this Moments View. And in this view, we want to set up a query so we can get our sample data. And first thing we can do is import Swift data. Whenever you're working with a container, the view that loads that file has to import Swift data, so make sure you do that. We'll start with a query, so at query, and we're going to sort the results by \moment.timestamp. And then we'll create a private var moments, and it'll be an array of moment object. Then in our preview, we can pass the sample data container. Let's create a function that has a subview that we'll reference. So we'll call this, it's a private, this could be a variable, private var path items, which returns some view. And then in this, we're going to have a for each, and that's going to return, it's going to go over the list of moments. And then we're going to say with the opening curly brace, we say moment in, and then inside of our block, we'll say text moment.title. And then in the body, we want to reference this component. So we will say path items. And for our purposes, we want to set a frame and set the max width to .infinity. And that way it fills the width of the screen. Let's wrap this path items, embed it in a scroll view. So as we add more items, it will fit. And so now you notice that we can scroll. So we're following the same pattern where we create a component that has the code for what we're displaying so that we can then reference it in the body and then add things around it. And it just makes it a little cleaner. So we did that with the moments entry view, and so we're going to follow that same pattern here. Next, we want to embed our list in a navigation stack, and then we'll give it a title. Right-click the scroll view, choose embed, and we'll say navigation stack. And then on the scroll view, we add the navigation title. And we're going to say Grateful Moments. So whenever you embed something in a stack, when you reference the navigation title, you're attaching the title to the view that is presented here. We're not adding the title to the navigation stack. So just keep that in mind. You're adding it to the view that is the main presentation that shows up on the screen. Next, let's add a toolbar. and we add the toolbar to the scroll view. So below the scroll view, we say dot toolbar, and then curly brace for the block, and then we have a toolbar item. Press tab, and we're going to say placement. We're going to say dot primary action. Then if I press tab again and I press return, it gives me the code block. And here we're going to have a button, and in the button we want to use the closure and then a label so that we can have a unique label. And we're going to pass an image, and we want a system name, and it's going to be the plus. So notice here we've added a button that is the plus button. So here we will have an action in a second, but just want to remind you we have a button and we're presenting it using the action block at the top and the label block, and that way we can have custom values for the label. You've seen other examples of a button where you just pass in the text, and then you could also have a system image, but this way it gives you a little more control over the visual of the button. When we press the plus button, we want to present the moment entry view, and we want to present it as a sheet. And the way we do that is we need a variable to keep track of whether we are showing or hiding at the moment, whether the view is being presented. So what we'll do is create a state variable, and we say at state, and it's a private var, and it'll be show create moment, and we'll set it to false. Then inside our button, what we will do is we'll say show create moment equals true. And then what we want is to add a sheet to this toolbar. Let's see, we're adding it to the button, and we say dot sheet, and then we say is presented, and then we bind it to the show create moment, and then we press tab and we press return to get our code block, and inside our code block we're going to say moment entry view with parentheses. So what's happening is we're presenting a sheet when the value of show create moment changes. And so when we set it to true, then we present it, and what we're presenting is the moment entry view. So if I go ahead and click the plus, and so now we have this that we created in the last video. And if you remember, we have our dismiss, and then we can discard the moment, and then it dismisses it. Or we can add plus, and remember we have to have a title. And so we could say, oh, Thanksgiving is what I'm grateful for. And then it adds it to our list. Right now we're working with sample data, and so we have a view and we know what it looks like with content populated. But in order to update and present when the app starts for the first time, it's going to be empty. So in order for us to see what that looks like, let's create another preview, and we'll say preview, whoops, hold on, preview, and we'll call this no moments. And then we set up a moments view, and then we pass in an empty model container. Model container for, and then it's just the moment object. And so we pass in an empty array of that would be moment objects. And so now up here on the preview, we click no moments, and now we see what it looks like when it's empty. If we have an empty array, then we want to present what is called an overlay. So if we go and we add it to the scroll view, press return, and there's a modifier called overlay. And inside the overlay, we're going to say if moments.isEmpty, then we want to use the content unavailable view. And we've done this before, but a content unavailable view has a couple of things you can present. So we have an open curly brace, and then we have a description block. And so now we can add some information. So we're going to say label, and we're going to say whoops, let's capitalize it, no moments yet, exclamation point. And then we can have a system image. And the image we want is exclamation mark dot circle dot fill. There we go. So we're presented with this. So here's our label, no moments yet. And then we can have a description which has text. And so we're going to use a text object, and we're going to say post a note or photo to start filling this space with moments. And so here you've got the description. Oh, I realize the tutorial says fill this space with gratitude. Sweet. Now we want to create a detail view so that when we select, if we go back to our first preview, when we select an item, we want to be able to go and see the details for that moment. So in the Moments folder, right-click, choose New File from Template, and it'll be a Swift UI view, and then choose Next, and we're going to call this Moment Detail View. Our Moment Detail View needs to reference a moment, so we'll pass var moment, which is of type moment. And then in our preview, let's pass in, for moment, we're going to pass in dot image sample. And then we also want to pass in the reference to our sample data container there. So now we can reference our data. And so we're passing in the image sample, which is from the sample data. So what I just did there, let me back up and show you what I just did. So this is available to us because it's part of the moment class. And so I press Command, and then I click on this variable, and it takes me to the file that has that information. So remember, we have these static moments, which are from, in this example, it's the image sample from the sample data item in index number 4, which happens to be the last item. And so this is the moment that we just passed in. If I go up here, I have my little navigation arrow. When I press back, it'll take me back to where I was. So that's one way you can navigate within Xcode to figure out what you wrote and easily jump to that file. So for this one, we're going to follow the same pattern where we're going to create a variable as a component so we can lay out our elements. So we're going to say private var content stack. That's going to return some view. And here we're going to have a v stack, and we'll set the alignment, press tab, and we want dot leading. And if I press tab again and press return, it gives me my code block. And temporarily, we're just going to put some time. We're going to put like timestamp, put another text of notes, and then another text of image. And this is just going to help us keep track of what we want to add to our view. And then up here in the body, we replace it with the content stack. And so then that'll show up here in our preview. We want to wrap this, embed it in a scroll view. And then for the V stack, let's give ourselves some framing and padding. So we're going to say dot frame, and we're going to say max width is dot infinity, so it fills the width of the screen. And then the alignment is going to be dot leading. That way everything's left aligned, as they say. And then we can say dot padding. and we'll just use the generic padding. So now it gives us a little more spacing. On the scroll view, we want to set a navigation title. So we say navigation title, and it's going to be the moment.title. So this will show up here. Now, remember, when you're working with a preview, you're only seeing the code that's written here. And the navigation title shows up if the element is embedded in a navigation stack. Well, in our case, we can't see that. But in the preview, you can actually wrap the preview in a navigation stack. And then now we see the view with the navigation title, just like that. Let's go ahead and start updating these items. So here, for the text, we're going to say, let's select the text, and we're going to say moment.timestamp, and then it's going to be style, dot date. And then, so now notice the date shows up. And then let's give it some formatting. And if we say dot font, dot subheadline. So now it changes the style and size of the font. Now we can update the notes. We want to check if the note is not empty, then we're going to present a note. Otherwise we won't show anything. So we're going to say if, and we use the exclamation point to say not. And so we say moment.note.is empty. Then we're going to present text, and it's going to be moment.note. And then we're going to give a text style, or sorry, text selection. Hold on. So the text, if we set the text selection, and it's this second item here, then we say dot enabled. So what this does is a text, when you have a text like this, it's just read only. You're just seeing it. There's no interacting with it. But if I say text selection, then I can actually click and hold, and then I can copy everything in that note. So that's what that does, is we're enabling the ability for us to copy and paste in case we want to share that. For the image, we need to see if there is an image in the associated with the moment. So we say if let image equal moment.image. Then we do open curly brace, and then we say image, and we pass in a UI image, which is the image value from the moment object. And then from here we need to make some modifiers. So we want to make this resizable, and I press tab, and then we want to say dot scaled to fit, and then press tab, and then we press dot clip shape. And we've done this in other videos, but remember we're passing in rounded rectangle, and then we have a corner radius. Press tab, and we'll pass in a value of 16. So notice that we now have a corner radius on our image. So the if let is a way to safely unwrap this value. Remember, if I press command and I go to image, the UI image is an optional, meaning that it could be nil, could be empty. And so in order for me to reference this image properly, I can use the if let. And so what happens is it's an if statement, but it says if this exists, then go ahead and create this variable called image. And so we say if let image, and then if it equals there and it exists, then I can reference that image, which I do here when I load it in the screen. On this screen, we want to give ourselves a way to delete a moment. And so to do that, we're going to use a toolbar. So again, if you go to the scroll view and we say dot toolbar, and then we give ourselves a toolbar item, press tab, and then the placement is going to be dot destructive action. And then if I tab and press return, I get my code block. And inside my code block, I want to create a button. And it's similar to what we did before, where we have an action block, and then we have a label. And then here we're presenting an image with system name, and we're going to use trash. So now we've got this, and it's going to be the trash can showing up here in the upper right. Similar to what we did in the moments view, where we presented the moments view thing. We presented it as a sheet when you created a new moment. We're going to present a confirmation dialog, because whenever you do something that is destructive, you always want to have a confirmation so that the user knows, hey, you're going to delete this. Are you sure you want to delete it? So to do that, we need a reference to a variable, and it's a state variable, and we say at state private var, and it's show confirmation, and we'll set it to false. And then in our button, we will say show confirmation equals true. So now when that value changes, we're going to present the confirmation. So the confirmation happens off of the button. We say dot confirmation dialog, and then the title is going to be called delete moment. And then the isPresented variable that we bind to is the one we just created. So we use the $sign and we say show confirmation. And then in the action, press return. In the action, we want to have a button that says delete moment. And then we pass in a role. And remember, we've done this before where we say it's destructive. And then on a confirmation, you also have a message. So we need a message block. And here it's going to be a text, and we're going to say the moment will be permanently deleted dot. And then earned badges. What does that say? Earned badges won't be removed. Okay. So again, when we press the button, we're presented with a dialog, and it says the moment will be permanently deleted. Earned badges won't be removed. Badges are something that we'll create later in the next video, but for now, we'll keep that as our text, and then we have delete moment. And when we press that, it's going to do something. And that something is, we got to delete it from our container. In order to delete it from the Swift data container, we need to first import Swift data so that we can reference it. And then, if you remember from previous videos, we need an environment variable, and that's going to be of type data container.self, and then we have a private var data container. So now we have a reference to the container. Now in our confirmation dialog, we're going to say data container dot context dot delete, and then we pass in the moment that we're currently referencing. And then we do a try and question mark data container dot context dot save. So the try call, again, it's asynchronous, and so we pass in that, and then we have it to save it. Now we need to dismiss. Once we've saved it, then we go ahead and dismiss this view that we're currently on, and it'll put us back to the previous screen. And so to do that, we need another environment. Remember, there's that built-in macro it's an environment called dismiss. So it's a /.dismiss, and then we call it private var dismiss. And then inside, underneath the where we created or saved it, then we call the dismiss method. So now we have everything we need to, once we're looking at a moment, we can then delete it. So let's go back to the moments view. And we now need to navigate when we press an item in the list. We need to be able to navigate to that moment detail view. And down here in the path items where we have created our list, what we'll do is wrap this in. So let's see, the best way to handle this, let's just delete this and we'll type it. So we create a navigation link, and then we load the moment detail view, and we pass in, for the moment, we pass in the moment. We're going to say that a lot. Okay, and then we also need a label. And for the label, we'll put the moment.title. Okay, so now each of these now has a link associated with it. So now when you navigate to the item, then we can see the detail view. If we delete it, we can delete it. I'm going to go back and let's create one. And I'm grateful for family. And then go ahead and save that. Then if I click into that, there's the details. And then I can go ahead and delete that and say delete moment. And then it dismisses it. And now we're back to this view. Now we get to some fun parts of this tutorial where we're going to create a custom view component. And this is pretty wild stuff. It's really cool to see how it works. But we're going to go through a lot of material. So don't worry if it doesn't make sense. You're going to have to watch it again. Also, I just noticed a spelling. So let's fix that. Post-it note or photos. Actually, photo to start filling this space. Good. Okay. Let's go to the custom views folder. Right click on that and choose new file from template. And we want a SwiftUI view. Choose next. And we're going to call this hexagon. Now the hexagon is going to accept other views and present and modify the content that is presented. So we're going to change this struct so that it accepts. We're going to put the less than sign, and we're going to say content, which is a view. It'll accept a view, and then it's going to return a view. And we're going to use a property called ViewBuilder. So it's at ViewBuilder, and it's going to be var content, and then we do opening, closing parentheses, and then we do the dash and the greater than sign. It's going to return content. And then in the body, we're going to say content. And then in the preview, we need to pass in a view. So we're going to say hexagon, and then we're going to do the curly brace, and then we're going to pass in a view. And we're going to call it hello world. Okay. Content. Oh, sorry, I misspelled that. Content. Okay. This is a little, it was confusing for me too. So let's just take it one step at a time. It'll make sense as we use this, but what you're doing is you're passing in a view to the hexagon view, and that then becomes part of the presentation in the body, so that here, for example, when we call hexagon, we're passing in a text object, which is a view, and that then gets passed in and is used here in the body. And it's this view builder so that we can pass in Swift UI views. What we're expecting in this case is we want to pass in a moment, so we need to create a var and we'll call it moment. And it's listed as an optional. We'll set it to nil. And then in the body, we're going to wrap the content in, embed it in a Z stack. And the Z stack allows you to place elements on top of each other. And in our case, what we want is, if there is an image, we want to place the image. So we're going to say if let background equals moment, and we say dot image. So if it exists, then we're going to say image, UI image, press tab, and then we pass in the background. And then we're going to set it to resizable, and we're going to say scaled to fit. And then in our preview, let's pass in a moment. So the moment is going to be moment.image sample. So again, that's the sample content. Whoops. Okay. We don't want this. Let's back out here. Image sample, close parentheses, and then here's our opening curly brace. And then here, the content is going to be text moment.imagesample.title. And we're going to set the foreground style to color.white. Okay. And then we need to pass in the dot sample data container, so we have access to everything. Okay, check this out. Now, it's a little hard to read, but the text, so what we've done is we've assigned the moment, so that becomes the image, and then we've passed in the text view, and that's what is this content that's showing here. It's a little hard to see. We're going to fix it in a minute, but it says rock on right there in white text. Next, we want to set some variables so that we can manipulate the view, because as the name suggests, hexagon, we're going to create a custom view that presents this detail, all this information, in a hexagon shape. So first we need to set up a variable called var size, which is a CG float. Press tab, equals 350. And then here, the content, we're going to say frame is width, which is size, which is the variable we just created. And then height, press tab, is also size. And then at the same time, we need to update the Z stack so that its frame, dot frame, the width is size, and the height is also size. We're going to change this as we go, but just for now, we're setting up these size variables. So you notice how the image resized inside of the Z stack and the content. Now this gets to the fun part. We want to present this using a mask. So in the Z stack, press return, and we want a dot mask. And then inside the mask, we're going to pass in an image. And the image is going to be system named, and it's going to be, you guessed it, hexagon.fill. Okay, check it out. So right now it is masking everything. We're using an image to mask everything, so everything inside the image is shown. Well, we got to fix the size, so let's go to that. So let's say dot resizable, press tab. Then we say the aspect ratio, we got to fix that. Aspect ratio dot fit. And then the frame, we're going to say width, size, height, size. Okay, I realized the mistake. Up here, it should be scaled to fill. Now we want to add a border around this, and we're going to use a background. And so for that, we need a couple more variables. So we're going to say private let border width equals 2, and then var border color, which is a type color, equals .ember. If you remember from the last video, we created a custom value called ember. Now what we want is to add a background, and so underneath the mask we're going to press return .background, and we're going to pass in, we want an image, and in this case we want system name, and it's going to be hexagon. And then we're going to set it to resizable aspect ratio is content mode fit. You see how it's updating as we go. Then we want to set the frame to width is our size and height is our size. And then we want to set the foreground style, and it's going to be a color, and we want the border color. Okay, now it's hard to see that here, at least on the screen here. But if you change the width, oh, sorry, I forgot one more thing. The reason you can't see it is we have to fix that. So for the mask, we want to set the mask so that it is smaller, the border width, the size is smaller than the border, you know, it's, just type this, I'll explain it, sorry. Size minus the border width, and then the height size minus the border width. Okay, now it's starting to show up. You see this color around it. And so what we're doing is we're reducing the size of the mask by the border width so you can see the background image, which is bigger. If you change this border to like 10, then you'll notice that it's much larger. So see that border width, but we'll go ahead and change it back to 2. And that makes it a nice subtle color as a border. At the moment, we've been referencing a size, and we want to be able to reference different sizes based on the order of the hexagon tiles and various things. And so in order to do that, we want to create what is called a hexagon layout, which is an enum that we can reference so that in our code, we can reference different sizes. Let's go ahead and go to our custom view and right click and choose new file from template. And this is going to be a Swift file, and choose next, and it's going to be called hexagon layout. In the hexagon layout, we want to create an enum, and it's going to be called hexagon layout. And we're going to have a couple of cases. So the first case is standard, and then next case is large. For now, we're only going to have 2 sizes, but the way we're writing this code is so that you can extend this and actually have more sizes and variation. And you'll see why we're doing it this way in order for you to be able to extend this and add more features in the future. So now we want a computed property called size. So we're going to say size, and it's going to return a CG float. Press tab, curly brace, and we want a switch statement. We're going to switch on itself. You can double click the statement. So the value is going to be self. And then the first case is going to be .standard. And then it's going to return 200. And then for the default, we actually don't need a default. If you have a case for all the items, then we're going to say dot large, and it's going to return 350. So now we've got these two sizes, and so this way the switch case, it switches through every case, and we're going to either be based on the layout will tell us what size we want. Now in order to use this, let's go back to the hexagon content, or the hexagon class. Sorry, this hexagon custom view. Instead of being a hard-coded value, we are going to say, now let's pass this in. We're going to say var layout, which is a hexagon layout, equals, and it's going to be standard. So we've set the value. Now, let's fix this by referencing the, we got to make these changes. So here we're saying layout dot size and layout dot size, and we're going to fix that in all the different places. Layout dot size and layout dot size. Layout dot size, layout dot size. Let's take a look at this error. I think I made a mistake somewhere. Okay, sorry, everybody's yelling at the screen. I didn't have a colon there, so that's why that was all out of whack. Okay. So what we've done is now we're passing in the layout and we're setting the case for the size. And so if I change this to dot large, now notice what happens. Preview reloads, and now we have the large tile. So I can put that back, standard, and then it changes size. So you can see the power of referencing external enums and layout information so that you have it in a standard file, so that you can then make updates throughout your code and it'll affect everything across the code base. Now we want to apply this to a hexagon view. So we're going to create a new file and we're going to put it in the moments folder, and we right click, choose new file from template. And this is going to be a Swift UI file. Choose next, and we're going to call this moment hexagon view. We're going to reference the moment, so we say var moment is moment. And then, whoops, hold on. You know what it is? My keyboard... What it is my keyboard is a little sticky. I gotta clean it. So when I'm pressing the colon or the semicolon key, it didn't press very well. So that's my excuse. I'm sticking to it. Okay, it is of type moment. Then we want to reference the layout. So we're going to say at state var layout, which is a hexagon layout, equals dot standard. So now we have a reference to that, and now we need to fix the preview because it's expecting a moment. So in our preview, we want to see multiple hexagon views in a row, and so we're going to make this let's delete this first. In our preview, we want a scroll view, and we want a moment hexagon view, and we're going to pass in a moment. And remember, we have some static data, so we're going to say moment.imageSample. And let's copy and paste this a few times. So press Command C, and we're going to do this 1, 2, 2. Whoops. Press return, paste, paste 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's change this. For the second one, let's add the layout, and we're going to set it to large. And then for this next one, we want it to be the sample. And for this last one, it'll be the sample with a layout dot large. Okay. Now, this is where the magic comes in. In our body, we're going to pass in a hexagon. And it's going to be the layout, comma, hold on, sorry, layout is the layout, and then the moment is the moment. And then we're going to say text, hello world. Okay, so check this out. Every time we're passing in, every time we load this hexagon view, we're passing it into the hexagon class that takes the information and presents it on the screen based on the layout size. So here we have a small, here we have a large, small and large. You remember that this sample data doesn't have an image, and so this is what it looks like when you don't have an image. Now, you can't see the text here because we're passing in the hello world and it's black text and you can't really see it. We're going to fix that here in a minute. But check this out. So we've passed in this moment hexagon view into the hexagon, and it returns everything here. Pretty crazy. Let's add a few more details to our hexagon layout file so that we can reference them in code throughout the application. We want to import Swift UI so that we can set up some font variables. So we're going to say var title font, and it's going to return a font object. And here we're going to switch based on the standard and the large. So based on the size, the layout case will return a certain font size. So we're going to say, oh man, I got to fix my keyboard. Maybe if I do it 100 times, it'll fix it. Honestly, what it is there's like food that falls into my keyboard because I kind of sit at my computer and eat food. So yeah. Clean your keyboards, people. Okay, so it returns a title font. So here we're going to say switch self, and then we're going to have case.standard, and it's going to return .headline. And then we're going to have case.large, and it's going to return .title.bold. And make sure the bold has the parentheses. Sweet. So now we have this computed variable that returns the font based on the current case of either standard or large. Let's do another font, and we're going to call this one var body font, and it's going to return a font, and it's going to be a switch statement self. We're going to say case.standard. It's going to return .caption2, and then the other case for .large is going to return .body. The reason we're using a switch statement here is because right now we only have two, so you could technically use a ternary statement, an if-then ternary, to return one or the other, but as soon as we add a third case, then we'll be able to add more values. So that's why we're using this switch case to loop through each, based on the case, the size that is selected, it returns the value that we want. Let's add some other variables that we can reference, and we want to have var timestamp bottom padding, and that's going to return a CG float, and we're going to return 0.08. Let's do another variable, var text bottom padding. That's going to return a CG float, press tab, curly brace, 0.25. And then we want var timestamp height, which is a CG float. And that's going to return, we're going to take our size, we're going to times it by, put an opening parenthesis, text bottom padding minus timestamp bottom padding. So the reason we're doing this is that because we're using this hexagon shape, the padding values are going to be weird because you've got the angled, edges. And so here we're calculating a percentage based on these values, based on the size that we're returning. Let's go back to our moment hexagon view. And here we're going to change the text. Let's replace this with a computed function. And so here we're going to say private func content stack, which returns some view. And here it's going to be the v stack, and we're going to say alignment dot leading. Press tab, press return in the code block. Then we're going to pass the moment dot title, and then font dot layout dot title font. Sorry, it's not font dot, it's font parentheses. We're passing the value that we calculate here. And then in the hexagon layout, we pass in the content stack. And now, notice that in the stack, we get the title as our text, and it has a certain font size. Notice the font size is smaller for the small standard size and larger for the large size. And then here this has text, says rock on. We're going to fix that in a second. We want to change the layout based on whether there's an image present or not. So one way to do that is to create a variable down here that says private var show image, and that'll return a Boolean. And here we're going to say moment.image is not equal to nil. So if it's not nil, it's going to return true. And if it is nil, it'll return false. Now we can reference that so that when we go to present the text in the VStack, we want to present, let's see, the note. So in the tutorial, what they're wanting is we're going to, underneath the title, every moment has a title, so we know that will exist. But we're going to say if not moment.note.is empty, comma, and not show image, then we're just going to say text moment.note, and then we're going to set the font to layout.body font. So now we've set the size of the font based on the moment. So here there's no image, and so we're going to show the note instead. We want to fix this so that right now the text and everything, it doesn't quite fit the screen. So let's change that so that on the VStack we're going to set the frame so that everything fits within the middle. So we're going to say frame and we're going to say max width, and it's going to be the layout.size times 0.8. So notice that the width is now smaller, so now it fits. Then the frame max height is going to be the layout.size times, and then put a open parentheses, show image. If there's an image, the size is going to be 0.15. If there's not an image, then it's going to be 0.5. Okay, like that. And then the dot padding, we're going to set the padding so that at the bottom, so dot bottom, comma, layout dot size times layout dot text bottom padding. So now notice it changes the text and places it up a little bit better. Let's keep going with our modifications here. What we're doing is we're creating another stack that represents if there's no image. And so let's just start with private func hexagon content. And that's going to return some view. And here we're going to have a Z stack, and the alignment is going to be dot bottom. Press tab, press return. In the code, we're going to say if show image, then we want the color to be clear, and then we present the content stack. Else the color, we want color dot ember, and then the content stack. And now in the body, how about I spell else properly? Then in the body, we're going to pass in the hexagon content. All right, a lot's going on here. Let's see if we can figure it out. So we've got the content comes in. We first line it up. We put the text. We put the notes if it exists and there's no image. Then we show the note. And then we have some layout here. And then we wrap that content stack based on whether there's an image or not. If there is an image, then we set the color clear, and then there's the stack so we see the image. But if there's no image, then we set the color as ember, and that's what's happening here. So those are now filling in with that color. Let's make some more changes so that it looks visually more compelling. So here we're saying if there is an image in the content stack, we're going to say dot frame max width is going to be dot infinity, so it fills the width. And then the padding is dot top, and we're going to set it to 8. And then the background, we're going to use a special background called ultra thin material. What that does is it presents this transparent background. And so here what we've done is we've set it the width of it, but then the padding, we've set it so that it only fills partially on the screen. So that gives us this cool effect. So it's a material object, so it's ultra thin material. And the tutorial says it's an easy way to add a blurred background to a view that automatically responds to scheme changes on the device. Sweet. On the content stack for the frame for without an image, let's add a frame, and we'll say height is layout.size times 0.8. What that does is it places it within the square visible area of the hexagon. So now the text fits within like that. In the content, we want to show the timestamp, and since the timestamp always gets created, we just create a text object, and so we say text moment.timestamp.formatted, and inside the formatted, we're going to say .datetime.month, and then in the parentheses, we're going to say .abbreviated .day. And now we need to fix it because it's off screen because of the hexagon shape. So let's fix that. So now we're going to say .font, and we're going to say footnote, and then .padding, we're going to say .bottom, comma, layout.size times 0.08. And then we're going to say frame, the max width is layout.size divided by 3. And then the frame, we're going to say max height is layout.timestamp height. So now it formats it and it fits it in to our hexagon nice and snug. Then the last item on this one, down in the content stack, we want to have a fixed size. So we say fixed size is horizontal, and it's going to be false for horizontal and true for vertical. So now it removes any empty space vertically. Let's go back to the moments view, and let's now replace the text. So right now we're using the title in our list here. So now what we're doing is instead we're going to pass in some moment hexagon views. So we'll delete this and we're going to say if moment is equal to moments.last, then we're going to return a certain sized hexagon tile. Otherwise, we say else, we're going to return moment hexagon view moment. And so notice here, these are all the standard size, but if it's the last one, we want it to be moment hexagon view and pass in the moment and then the layout, and we're going to set the layout as .large. So now notice that it puts the last one as the large size. Something I forgot, I notice the color is showing up as the button color. We want to change that, and there was something I missed. If we go back to the moment hexagon view in the content stack on the Z stack, I need to set the foreground style to white. So now everything in this, all of the elements here, the text is going to show up as white. So now if I go back, we're going to see now it shows up white. So that's what we're expecting. Now to give this a little more design and make it a little more aesthetically pleasing, we're going to add an offset so that as these are added on in the list, they're going to be in a kind of an S shape. So to do that, we first need to create a variable that determines the offset amount. So if I come up here and I say static let offset amount, and it's going to be a CG float equals 70. And then down in the for each block, you can pass in, we can do some things here. So we're going to use a method called enumerated. And then from there, it'll give us the index for each item. And then with that index value, we can then say for this index, make an offset here. For this index, make an offset a different place. So in order to do that, in the for each, we're going to say moments.enumerated. And then the ID is going to be \0. And then we're going to say index, comma, moment in. So now we can reference the index. So what we're doing is we updated the for each so that we're using the enumerated. We're telling it this ID, which refers to the index of each item. And then we pass that in. And now on the dot offset, for each one that we add, we're going to say dot offset. And then we're going to say the X is, and we're going to use a sign, S-I-N, and it's going to be double, and it's going to be the index, and it's going to be times dot pi divided by 2, and then times self dot offset amount. Okay, it's a mouthful. But what's happening is it's calculating a sine wave based on the index number and then the value of pi divided by 2 times the offset. And so then what that means is that as this is added, the next item is added and it's offset to one side. But then, and so you notice how it's kind of making this S pattern. The last item is always at the bottom and it's always a large one, so we don't apply an offset to that one. Now we want to add what's called a scroll transition so that as the content scrolls on and off the screen, we get a special effect. And so to do that, we go to the bottom of the for each. Hold on, where is it? Else. It's at the bottom of the navigation link. So we say dot scroll transition. And then opening curly brace, we're going to say content, comma, phase in. Then in our code block, we say content, and then we say, whoops, hold on, content, press return, then we do a dot opacity, and it's going to be phase dot is identity. And then if it is, it's going to return 1. Otherwise, it's going to return 0. And then dot scale effect is going to be phase dot is identity. We're checking if, whoops, is identity. Then we say 1 or 0.8. Okay, so the transition phase. Oh, it did this autocomplete. Sorry, it's not phase index, it's phase in. People are probably yelling at the screen and I'm over here blindly looking at it. Okay, again, here's what's happening. A scroll transition has different phases, meaning where the content is when it arrives. So we reference the content and we say based on phase.isIdentity, which is the identity phase it refers to when the content is displayed normally rather than being in transition. So that means if the content is already on screen, then we don't do anything. It says appearing or removing. Sorry, I'm reading this is what the effect looks like. So if you scroll up, notice how as the identity of the content, the phase is changing, the opacity changes. And notice at the bottom, the same thing, the opacity is changing as the content scrolls up. So it's changing size and opacity. Pretty fancy. Is identity just means it's on screen and it's not transitioning. So that's pretty cool. And then the last thing in this tutorial, we want to add what's called a default scroll anchor. So if we come up here to the scroll view after the toolbar, we're going to say dot default scroll anchor. It's going to be dot bottom for dot initial offset. And then we do another default scroll anchor that is at the bottom for size changes. So the default scroll anchor changes the behavior based on when something is added or deleted. And in this case, we want it to set to the bottom when these things change. Let's add one more scroll dot default scroll anchor. And it's dot top for dot alignment. So what this does, the dot alignment change means that when the size of the content is smaller than the size of the scroll view, how do you want the content to be presented? So for example, if we come down here, let's add our content. Let's see, in the preview, we want to add dot environment data container with the parentheses. And then let's take a look at the no moments. And then when we add a moment, say I'm grateful for iOS. And then it adds it and it's presented at the top. All right, we've done quite a bit in this tutorial. Let's go ahead and check our understanding. We'll take a look at the file, the custom layout, go to the end here. Quite a bit of stuff going on. Okay, why would you use a ViewBuilder property? One, to initialize the property with a closure, to create a view, to build more complex views. So what they're saying, the ViewBuilder property is when you initialize the property with a closure, I think. Okay, yes. ViewBuilder helps you compose views that provide parameters as a closure. So you're passing in another view. This allows you to take that as part of passing it in. When do you use mask? To add a view to another view, to apply the alpha of a view to the current view, to clip the shape of a view. Okay, and so here, the trick question is, you might think, oh, we're clipping the shape. Well, there's already a property for that. It's to apply the alpha of a view to the current view. Mask adds one view to another and applies the alpha of the first view to the second. What is an appropriate use of content unavailable? When the view to be displayed is still in development, showing a view has no associated data to display as a placeholder for when content is loading. So I think it's this one, when a view has no associated data. When your view relies on underlying data that is inaccessible or empty, it's the perfect time to use content unavailable view. A view should always have a populated state and an empty state. Well, this is a bit of a trick question because we say false, and the reason why is because each view in an app has a specific need, and each should properly handle all of its appropriate states for the best user experience. I don't care for this question. I think that's kind of silly. Each should properly handle. They're not. It's the keyword always. It's not always. It's just based on its needs. So yeah, okay. Confirmation should be required whenever a user does which of the following: interacts, modifies underlying data, takes a destructive action. So we know when we do the destructive action, we really need to, anything that could remove data or make it destructive should be preceded by confirmation. Awesome. Great job. Thank you for hanging in with me. I know this was a longer video as well, but there's so much content in here. It's really amazing what you can do with Swift UI. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.